It was a rainy afternoon in New York City. In the corner of a cozy little diner, a man in a perfectly tailored suit sat with his young son. The man's name was Alexander Cole, a billionaire real estate mogul known for his sharp business mind and cold demeanor. He was feared in boardrooms, envied by rivals, and admired by the media, but what no one knew was that behind his hard exterior, Alexander carried a burden few could understand. Beside him sat his only son, Ethan, a boy of just 8 years old, born with cerebral palsy. Ethan's smile could light up a room, but his body didn't always cooperate. His tiny hands trembled when he tried to grip his spoon, and more often than not, food slipped back onto his plate. Alexander, always busy, often grew impatient. He loved his son deeply, but he didn't always know how to show it. That day, Alexander was buried in his phone, scrolling through urgent emails, while Ethan struggled silently with his lunch. A bowl of soup sat in front of him, now lukewarm. His small arms shook as he tried again to lift the spoon, only to spill it down his shirt. The boy's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Alexander sighed, but before he could react, someone else did. A young waitress, no older than 25, had been watching from across the room. Her name was Sophie. She was tired, juggling 2 jobs just to pay for her mother's medical bills. Life had been cruel to her. Her father had abandoned the family, and she had learned the value of resilience the hard way. Yet despite her struggles, Sophie carried a heart overflowing with kindness. Without hesitation, she walked over to Ethan's table, kneeling gently beside him. "Hi there, buddy," she said softly, her smile warm. "Would you like me to help you with that?" Ethan's eyes lit up, and he nodded shyly. Sophie carefully lifted the spoon, blowing on the soup before feeding him with patience and tenderness, as though he were her own little brother. Alexander looked up from his phone, startled. For a moment, he was speechless. He was used to people bowing before his wealth and power, but here was this ordinary waitress, treating his son with a care and love that he, a father, had failed to give in that moment. He watched quietly as Ethan giggled between spoonfuls, his face beaming with joy. Sophie chatted with him about superheroes, telling him he was stronger than Iron Man. The billionaire father felt something stir in his chest, a mix of shame, gratitude, and admiration. When the meal ended, Alexander motioned Sophie over. His voice was firm, but unusually gentle. "Why did you do that? You don't even know us." Sophie hesitated. Then she said, "Because kindness doesn't need a reason, sir. I know how it feels to struggle, and sometimes, a little help can make someone's whole day better." Her words pierced Alexander's heart like an arrow. For years, he had built empires, signed billion-dollar deals, and surrounded himself with luxury, yet in all that time, he had forgotten the simple power of love. Over the next few days, Alexander couldn't stop thinking about Sophie. He returned to the diner with Ethan again and again. Each time, Sophie was there with the same bright smile, talking to Ethan, encouraging him, feeding him when his little hands grew tired. Slowly, Alexander began to join in too, learning from Sophie's patience, putting down his phone, and finally being present with his son. One evening, after the diner had closed, Alexander stayed behind. He approached Sophie and asked about her life. That's when he learned the truth. Her mother was battling cancer, and Sophie was barely managing to cover the medical bills. She had given up her own dreams of college and a better life just to take care of her mom. For the first time in years, Alexander felt humbled. Here was a young woman with nothing, yet she gave everything she had for the people she loved, and for strangers too. That night, as Alexander tucked Ethan into bed, Ethan whispered, "Dad, I like Sophie. She makes me happy." Tears welled in Alexander's eyes. His son had found joy not in wealth or luxury, but in kindness. The very next day, Alexander made a decision that would change Sophie's life forever. He returned to the diner, and when Sophie brought him his coffee, he slid an envelope across the table. Confused, Sophie opened it, and her hands trembled. Inside was a check, enough money to cover all her mother's treatments, and then some. Her eyes widened, and tears streamed down her face. "I can't take this," she whispered, shaking her head. Alexander looked at her firmly, his voice breaking for the first time. "You already gave me more than I could ever repay. You gave me back my son's smile. This is the least I can do," Sophie cried, covering her mouth, overwhelmed. She hugged Ethan, and then, hesitantly, hugged Alexander too. For the first time in years, Alexander allowed himself to be vulnerable. From that day on, Sophie became more than just a waitress in their lives. She became family. Ethan adored her, and Alexander, the billionaire who thought he had everything, realized he had been poor in the ways that mattered most, until Sophie reminded him. Years later, Ethan grew stronger with therapy, supported by the love of both his father and Sophie. Alexander funded a foundation for children with disabilities, naming Sophie as the director. Her selflessness became a beacon for thousands, and her story spread far and wide. And it all began with a bowl of soup, a trembling spoon, and a waitress who believed kindness needed no reason. So, dear viewers, what do we take away from this? That no act of kindness is ever too small. Sometimes the simplest gesture, a smile, a helping hand, a moment of patience, can touch a heart more deeply than riches ever could. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, Heart of Humanity, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness is the greatest gift of all. Because who knows, your small act of love today could change someone's life forever.